The picture behind you, like everything's on fire, that's actually my OpenClaw server a couple times already. I mean, I set everything up, and when you set it up as root, that's obviously bad advice. You should never do that. So it's running as root, and I got really frustrated in Telegram, and I'm writing something, and I said, just delete it. Just delete, whatever it is. Well, OpenClaw took it literally and deleted the entire project and down to the root and just deleted the server. No longer responsive. I was like, wow, okay, that worked.
Hey, welcome to the Agentic DevOps podcast. I am your host, Bret, and this episode, I've got my friend Brian Christner coming in from Europe. We've known each other for a decade. He's a Docker Captain alumni and really one of these leading edge tech guys that's always focused on cloud native leading edge tech. He actually runs an online casino company out of Switzerland, and we don't really get too much into the weeds of that whole world, but he runs developer teams. He manages an organization. He has to worry about security policy for AI. And so we talk a little bit about that. This whole episode is mostly around what we're both seeing in terms of tooling, agent harnesses, the models that we recommend and pick right now, because right now there is at least a distinct difference between the very top of the line models like Opus and GPT 5.4 versus everything else. And we get into the weeds of it. We talk about security strategy around OpenClaw, because if you've heard about that thing in the last couple of months, like it is definitely capturing the zeitgeist. And then even a new project called NanoClaw, which is a variant of OpenClaw, or really I should say a competitor technically, because it sounds like it's written from scratch. And it runs natively in Docker containers, which is the whole goal here. I'm really hoping that very soon we're all going to be running these things in some sort of encapsulated protection area like a container provides, right? We've seen Claude Code recently shift to an actual VM. So if you're interested in Claude Code, we know that that thing is isolated on your machine away from your standard operating system because it runs in a Linux VM, just like Docker containers. But it's nice to see new projects coming out that are doubling down on container use, because I've been waiting for the industry to finally catch up with the security practices and all of the isolation technologies that we've built for the last few decades and make that the standard for using AI agents, which, as we know, sometimes hallucinate and tend to install tools and do things on your local system that maybe you don't want them to do. So it's a great conversation covering a wide array of AI issues, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Brian Christner. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Bret, how you doing?
All right, I'm glad to have you here. This is Brian Christner. We are on the opposite sides of the pond from each other. I'm over in North America. He's in Europe and Switzerland. So Brian and I go back over a decade at this point, at least probably a decade, because you're an OG captain, and we've got a lot of experience in containers and infrastructure. Now you manage teams of engineers. Is that an accurate statement? Or a team?
Yeah. So part of our organization, we have a development team that's handling a lot of our infrastructure. They're building Kubernetes clusters. They have everything built there. Yeah. But essentially, I'm running an online casino, one of the top 3 largest casinos in Switzerland. And we obviously have a lot of data. And this data is in the massive database, but it's all orchestrated with Kubernetes and our services that we're creating.
Yeah. And we've had you on and talked about some of that stuff. We actually had a really popular episode with Brian a couple of years ago that I probably should have pulled up, because we were talking about jobs. Of course, that has aged not like fine wine, because job market right now is insanity.
Yeah.
I'm not sure any of those rules have changed though, but we talked about like DevOps roles and operations engineering roles and like helping people, sort of trying to give them like junior career advice, like how to help you stand out from the crowd. I think now everyone's just scrambling to know as much AI as possible, anticipating some sort of job shortage that only will be saved by you knowing AI, which is kind of, we say it nicely. We say it with like, I think the industry's been saying, you won't be replaced by AI, you'll be replaced by someone who knows AI, I think is the thing that we all say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced that that's entirely true. I'm getting more anecdotes directly from friends. I just talked to someone this last week that is losing their lead DevOps engineer that isn't sure they're going to get permission from management to replace them. So they're scrambling to figure out if AI can like help them automate some of the toil that the DevOps engineer was doing, like the daily stuff, the normal activities, and if they can like use skills or I was advocating for skills. I've been in love with skills for a couple of months now, and I'm sure we're going to talk
Huge
about
fan
that a
as
little
well.
bit.
Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing Brian's stories about OpenClaw. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm not sure we're going to specifically talk about DevOps AI advice, but that's my whole jam is trying to figure out where these tools
Yeah.
work and helping us with, obviously they can write Terraform. Obviously they can write, GitHub Actions workflow files. Like that's a thing, but how do we automate things that weren't previously automatable by putting in a non-deterministic robot is kind of where my head's at lately. I think I wanted to hear from you on, other than OpenClaw, which I guess
Sure.
we technically, I guess, could call that an agent harness, but it's not a harness for code necessarily or text writing.
I
In
mean,
a way
I
that,
like to describe OpenClaw. Sorry to interrupt you,
no,
Brett.
yeah,
Is
go ahead.
like OpenClaw is essentially an orchestrator of LLMs because you're able to connect to any LLM you want out there. So you can connect to OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, whatever you want. And you can switch between the two and you can really configure down to the agent level. And that's where I find like the superpower of OpenClaw at the moment because it's open source and you can really configure it however you want. So you're not tied into a specific LLM of the day, flavor of the day LLM.
Right. But you wouldn't use necessarily OpenClaw to stare at code while you're like you would Claude Code, right? Like you wouldn't, it's not a TUI in the way that we think of like Claude Code or OpenCode or
No,
VS Code. Okay. So,
I'm thinking more like kicking off tasks. Like, hey, can
right.
you go research this for me? Can you go, build this marketing plan? These type of tasks, perfect use
Right.
case. But I mean, like coding, like you said, it's better than the terminal.
Okay. So before we get into OpenClaw, because I feel like the whole episode could be consumed by that. And I want to get to,
Mhm.
I wanted to talk first around like, are you hearing? Like, what is the general vibe in the company? Are you allowed to use AI at all, even in your industry? Is that something that your engineers are able to take advantage of? And if so, like what are some of the things you're seeing out? Are they choosing Claude Code? Are you seeing that happening? I was just looking for some
So
sort of firsthand
we,
experience.
we really have like an AI enabler within the company. And she does an amazing job. She like onboards everybody within the company. And think of us, we're an online casino and we have a physical casino as well. So we have everything from cooks to like casino technicians to online developers. We have everything in between. And the onboarding of these different skills is just amazing. Because I mean, like our executive chef, I mean, he's built a complete course around how you can make like brunches and everything like this. How you do all your ordering and everything through AI. So, I mean, we're really enabling everyone within the organization, which is really cool.
Yeah.
The challenge is it's moving so fast. So trying to keep everyone updated and keeping the guardrails in place is very difficult. And we don't want to load any customer data in there. That's definitely a no-go for us. So we're keeping no-go out all customer data. But as far as like just, yeah, normal KPIs or like marketing, these type of things where it's not the customer impacting,
Right.
that's no problem for us.
Are they prescriptive, or as an organization, are you prescriptive in like what harnesses or IDEs people use, or are people able to just? Is it like when you think of from your security mindset, are you focused on particular model companies, or because organizations I've seen, like there's all sorts of things. Everything's wild, wild west, but some companies like
Yes.
they're like we have Gemini, and that is what we bought as a company, and
Mhm.
that's what all developers will use. And so then you're kind of, as an engineer, you're sort of limited to whatever the company buys you. And then you sort of see this shadow AI where people sort of sneak out and use something
Yes.
that's maybe not approved. How do you think of it? Do you think it's like you got a plethora of things and everybody can choose from a smorgasbord? How does that go?
So, I mean, we have like a AI steering committee where we actually decide which tools we should onboard within the company. And it's really like, where's the data stored and what kind of data protection do they have, these type of things. But I mean, generally, all the tools are available to us that most people would use. There are some exceptions, some of the Chinese models and whatnot. It just, they don't follow the European data regulations, so we can't onboard them. And that's a hard no for us. But otherwise, I mean, everything's quite open for us. So, I mean, we have Gemini in use, we have Perplexity, we have OpenClaw. I mean, not OpenClaw, Claude, but we have all these things running. So it's basically whatever your use case is, you can kind of pull that specific model down. Now, for the majority of people within the company, we try to onboard them to Copilot just because the guardrails are much easier to control. And we know what's going into the model. Now, developers, obviously, they want more control. So, I mean, they're going direction, OpenAI and Claude.
Okay. So when you said Copilot, you're specifically talking about Microsoft Copilot, not GitHub.
Microsoft Copilot, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Horrible branding by Microsoft
I know.
right? So everyone gets confused.
Naming is hard, man. Naming is hard. I mean, I do appreciate it. If it was, I feel like it'd be much more Microsofty if it was more like every one of them was Copilot, but instead of it being very vague and confusing, that there's another couple of words after that we have to say, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah, if it was Microsoft original, it would be like Microsoft Copilot something edition, V2 or so, and we'd have to say that because then there's also this other thing that's the edition, and we'd have to have an acronym
dash
because it would be too long to say, so we'd have to
right.
Yeah, because I'm such a GitHub person. I mean, I'm teaching GitHub. I've consulted on GitHub for at least 6 years, specifically around GitHub Actions, because I'm not necessarily teaching people how to do commits. I'm teaching them more about workflows and automation and deployments and all that stuff. Obviously, my Copilot world is rolled around in GitHub Copilot. I am aware that there is a Microsoft Copilot, and I technically think I used it a few times with an Office 365 account. But I see it a lot with other like non-tech business friends. I see them in chat on the mobile Copilot app and they talk about their work AI. So that's a big win for Microsoft there.
I mean, it's decent. I'm not a massive fan of it because the hurdle to automate something with this is it's massive. I mean, for example, to automate an email coming into your inbox and then feeding it to Copilot and having it all working every day is a mission. So, I mean, Clip Pilot. I like that one from James.
Yeah. Clippy Pilot.
But I mean, generally it's getting better. It's just, when you compare it's supposed to be OpenAI, right? But if you compare Copilot to OpenAI, it's night and day difference.
Okay. Yeah. So it's maybe an older, or there's there's hidden, it's obscured away, right? So that we're not sure about what's going on in the background.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because that's the general vibe. I mean, we talked about this, like since Opus 4.5 was released in November, I think the general vibe in the industry is like, okay, that December might be, I think I was framing it this way yesterday. December is the epoch of many of us suddenly taking AI seriously as an engineering tool, as opposed to it being a fancy autocomplete. And I spend far less time arguing. I spend far less time dealing with hallucinations. And I think the way we're going about it with some of these modern concepts of skills over skills and maybe like CLI over MCP, not that MCP is going away, but I think that its hype cycle has been pretty fast to go like all the way up.
Incredible, right?
And then like everyone's like, it's not really that great. Actually, I'm not really even using any. Like I just tell the tool to use my CLI tools. And so now you see things like I just saw last week. I think it's Google who launched a Google Workspace or Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Drive CLI, I think it does. I don't know if it does all of them.
It's really good.
Is it good? Okay. Yeah.
So it's like essentially like a MCP to Google's ecosystem.
Yeah.
That is quite nice. I mean, now if you get rate limited or whatever, I don't know yet, but it's on my to-do list.
But it's a CLI tool, right? My understanding is it's a CLI tool. Right. So instead of us having to add an MCP tool with 50 or 100 different MCP tools in it, and then worry about security and authentication, we're just using a CLI tool, and that CLI tool manages its own authentication, and it only has to know the help file of the CLI tool and the command structure. Correct. It doesn't have to know all these MCP tools, which I believe is better on tokens, if I remember correctly, looking into some of that. Like,
I can tell you token horror stories on OpenClaw. I've burned my credit card into many bits and pieces. Yeah, being like an early adopter of OpenClaw.
A friend of mine yesterday said he tried the fast mode in Opus, and like an hour later, he had like a $25 bill or whatever like that. And he's like, okay, maybe not fast mode. It's very nice, but we're all challenged as well with AIs are getting faster, but we still have the waiting game, and that creates like this flow problem that I don't know how to describe it, but you end up feeling like you need to multitask. And
the thing is with everyone's complaining about memory and all these different models, right?
Mhm.
So everyone's saying, hey, it forgets what I'm doing. I constantly have to remind my model that my name is Brian, whatever. But the thing is, we're building out these models, these memory models, which means we're having more context we're passing to the model each time.
yeah.
So the model's growing and we're just bombarding these models with tons of tokens just to say, I'm Brian,
Right.
and
Here's
that's
here's a
why the
list of
costs are
tools.
just exploding.
Yeah.
Yeah. The costs are exploding because we want more memory at the moment.
Yeah. I've talked a lot about OpenCode lately, so we're going to get into OpenClaw in a minute, but I think Claude, we're both, I think, in agreement that Claude Code is probably something that's in our radar. I've been using, it was kind of, I feel like the first successful TUI. I was early at VS Code's Copilot back in the beta. I think it was like 2023, maybe, when the beta of Copilot came out. And I think we had a show here like the day after Copilot came out. And we haven't exactly been the AI channel. I definitely have not pivoted to be like everything AI, like a lot of my
Yeah.
friends are, much to my detriment on YouTube. But the things that I have started to gravitate to are shying away from things like OpenCode or Codex specifically, simply because I find myself wanting to switch models too often, and I don't want to be locked into a harness that's locked into a particular vendor's models. So I started trying out OpenCode in December, moving from Claude Code. And I, at the time, was actually trying the Copilot CLI, the Codex CLI, before Codex actually had a GUI, and the Claude Code CLI, obviously. And I shifted to OpenCode, and now it's the only thing I use. And I love that I have a Copilot subscription, which is technically like OpenRouter. It gives me all the hits, all the great models. I can do that through Copilot. I can do that. I have a subscription to OpenAI and to Claude. And so I can pull in all three of those subscriptions into OpenCode and switch between the models at will in the middle of conversations. And so a lot of times when I run into if I run into my Claude limit for the day on Opus, I just shift to my other subscription.
Shift to a different model.
Yeah, and I go from my Claude subscription to my GitHub's Copilot subscription and just keep going, keep rolling with it. I think there's technically token limit differences, because if you get really into the nerdy details of the APIs, like Claude is, Anthropic has moved to a newer, modern API away from the chat API before, and I think GitHub is still on the older structure. So but OpenCode is a wonderful open source project because it just handles all of that. And in fact, if we did a demo, I would show you, if you scroll. I was showing some friends yesterday, because they're all Claude Code users, and I've been like the sole OpenCode user, and I'm ranting about it all the time to them. I'm like, did you know you can have one conversation and watch it from the TUI, from the GUI, and from remote web mobile on my phone, and I can see the conversation on all three happening at the same time, and I don't have to use WhatsApp. I don't have to, not to knock on OpenClaw, but I can have the full-fledged experience of the UI that we're all used to, with the proper diff formation and all that stuff, as opposed to chatting at it through an instant message tool that is not meant for agentic screen presentation. Yes. And I much prefer that. I have to use, with OpenCode, it's not a cloud service like Claude or ChatGPT or anything like that. So you have to use like Tailscale or something to get you back to your machine. But I run it as a server. In fact, I showed a diagram of running it as a server. You just run OpenCode server or OpenCode web, and it launches as a background process, and then you can connect from any of the three different ways to connect: web, fat client, or TUI. Yeah. And it works. I'm going to have to start, if they were an actual product company, I would start looking for a sponsorship, because I talk about them so much as my favorite tool. But other than that, I'm also very much into Copilot and VS and the Copilot world, because I'm finding that, companies that are all in on GitHub tend to use Copilot first. And when I talk to what I would call normie developers, not like bleeding edge, always on the, the people that haven't yet put OpenClaw in their closet.
Exactly.
They tend to be in their traditional IDE world, whether that's VS Code or, PHP Storm or, whatever IDE they're used to. Yeah. And they're just using whatever came with that. So with VS Code, the default is Copilot, even though you can put all the other ones in. OpenCode has
whatever
a plugin.
Model you want. Yep.
Yeah, Claude has a plugin. I should say for the audience, like we haven't talked about this on the show, but it's even getting more complex now. And I've had to draw this out a couple times on the stream, because now with your GitHub Copilot subscription, you can now use Claude Code or the Claude app inside of GitHub or inside of VS Code as your agent of choice inside the Copilot harness, and which basically means you don't need a Claude Code subscription to use any of the official Claude tooling.
Exactly. Yep.
And that gets...
Which is great because, I mean...
Yeah, it's awesome.
I think this abstraction from the actual, or marrying yourself to a specific company is kind of a thing of the past. You're just going to go for the best model eventually, right? Whatever, it might be Claude does code and OpenAI does something else and whatever. And you just have it set up where, I have a use case and my swarm of agents go out to the right model and get it done.
It does feel weird to commit to any one company. I mean, I feel like you're pretty safe if you committed to Anthropic right now, but...
I think so, yeah. But I believe doesn't matter which company you go with, I really believe your local setup is super important. I mean, I'm harping on this as like your human operating system or your Bret operating system, where you have to set up like all your agents, you have to set up all your template files and memory files locally and really use that as your basis. And it doesn't matter what model you used in, because it should always read that locally. I use Gemini with OpenClaw, and when I had the same setup for all the models, and Gemini was the most apologetic. Every time I would do something, I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it didn't work properly," and I would be like, "It's so frustrating. Like, stop apologizing, just fix it."
Yeah, that's the thing right now too. Like, not every developer gets to choose their models. This is something Laura Taka was on the show last year and was talking about, like, one of the biggest barriers for developers in enterprise is the fact that the enterprise doesn't necessarily hand out licenses to everyone. And if it does, it might be very prescriptive to which models or harnesses they can use. So people are kind of just stuck using whatever their company decided on a year ago, which was that's like the equivalent of making a decision and keeping it for a decade. Like, the challenge right now is if you make a commitment as an organization, that's a really, like, you could essentially be at this point the equivalent of years behind in AI because you've aligned yourself. And that's something that's not, like, IT purchasing isn't used to that. Like, lawyers and contracts and all these things aren't used to that. And so I sympathize with people like James because you're having to use Gemini. Everyone I know, like pretty much all of my bleeding edge friends that are living in AI all day long as developers, and these are people that get to choose whatever tool they want to use because they're all small businesses or subcontractors, or they're product people that are making their own products or whatever. I'd say 99% of them are on Opus 4.5 or Opus 4.6. The other 1% are on GPT 5.4 because 5.4 specifically...
The new model that just dropped,
Yeah, specifically 5.4 is showing really good signs of backend code. It's evidently a horrible designer. So, like, if you had to ask me this week, and it will probably change next month, Opus 4.6 is go-to for the least number of hallucinations and the longest run cycles before I have to, like, Ralph loop it through, or use I don't know if you know about Ralph loops, but like before I have to clear context, like, so like Opus is the jam, like Opus, maybe Opus for planning and Sonnet for actually doing the work if you want to save tokens, GPT 5.4 if it's doing back-end stuff but not front-end, nothing design related. And then I don't know where Gemini falls in there other than like Nano Banana for me. Like, I make images with Nano Banana and I don't use Gemini for anything else.
That's it.
So the problem is like developers, like this is the part that I hate. Like, a year ago, I didn't want to talk about any of this because, well, all the models were kind of, I feel like a year ago, all the models were kind of I think we were doing like Sonnet 3.5 at the time, right? 3.7. Yep. And so the problem is, like, people are stuck on a particular, what I would call legacy model just because it's only like 6 or 8 or 10 months old.
Exactly. Or not even.
Right. And that model is, I don't know, 3 times worse than Opus, maybe. So that's the real problem right now, is I feel like we've got first-class citizen, like we've got people that are loving life on Opus, and then we've got people struggling on older models Gemini. Or older versions or approved models or whatever. And they're like, everything's garbage. And I'm like, no, actually, it's not. I mean, there's plenty of garbage to be found, but it is so much better if you just try this. And not everybody can do it. Not everybody gets to have that.
I think all the models are good. They just require, for example, Gemini. I used it for a long time. And I just think you have to set up the prompting much differently compared to the other models. Once you get it kind of set up, it works. I still believe, like you said, Claude is the best designer. In Claude Desktop, they had this design skill. If you're using Claude, just enable that. It does amazing websites or graphics. It's really nice. And it's right out of the box. You don't have to do anything. Just enable the graphics skill or the design skill.
Right. That's maybe something to talk about too, real quick, is like all of these things require effort in terms of getting your agents.md file for the project really honed in. Although there's just a report that came out a couple weeks ago that's suggesting that agent files actually reduce the quality of the finished product in every test. I don't know if you saw that, but that was, I didn't even know what to think about that. But skills to me have been a game changer in the last couple of months. And if you're not someone who's adapted to skills, I'm pretty sure all the harnesses now have got a way to use them. The paths might be slightly different depending on the harness, but creating the skill markdown files or finding good ones on the web that I have read and I am sure do not have any sort of prompt injections, that's key. But I feel like that has changed the game for me in allowing me to give the harness work without a lot of rigor and it not losing its mind. And I think that's the key distinction between like now and 6 months ago. Is 6 months ago, if I didn't give it a very long prompt, a very clear, we were all like pasting and storing prompts.
Yeah.
And then we had commands and we were trying to store them in commands because we didn't want to have to type the whole prompt or paste it. And now I'm not doing any of that. I'm only doing skills. And I don't know about you, but I'm finding that that's all I really need. I just need to write the skill and I keep having the agent update whenever it almost reminds me of like the rule in ops is when you have a production failure, the rule in ops is you create a test so that somewhere in your test pipelines that failure was tested to make sure it won't happen again. Like the goal is never the same failure twice. I feel like with skills and AIs now, if it just happened yesterday, I was having it walking. I was actually running a SOP for me, a standard operating procedure of just something in my courses that I would normally have like a virtual assistant do for me. And it's going through processing this text and creating some HTML and things for me that I need for each lecture in a video. And it made a couple of mistakes, put some things out of order. And I realized, the skill needs to be updated. So I just ask it to update the skill to please fix this and then also update the skill so it doesn't happen again. And I feel like that's my new operator failure mode is if I see the AI misbehave, it's probably a lack of it not having the proper instruction. I just need to update the skill and have it retry and then it usually corrects itself. Is that something that you're seeing?
It's back to the context question again. It's really, sometimes it forgets how to use the skill. So maybe you have to declare the skill better so it understands the skill better. But I mean, the skill works, but sometimes I have to go again and say, hey, don't you remember you used the skill last time like this, and it worked? And then I realized maybe I have to add more context to it. So it realizes if it starts a new chat with this skill, it should be able to use it right off the bat. And I mean, I built all sorts of skills. It's really, I find that's really the game changer at the moment is skills. Like you said, it's where I'm investing all my time at the moment.
How do you manage your skills? Like, I've been looking into the NPX skills tool. I think Vercel made it. I'm not an expert in it yet. I've really only had like a week's use of it, but it's helped me.
Okay.
I was making them all manually before then, and then, or like downloading, copy and pasting from GitHub repos, finding ones I liked, and I'd store them in my global path, which I think is like in my user directory .claude /skills and then skill name. And I realized suddenly that I was spending a lot of time copying and pasting them between projects, and I haven't really figured out, like, I don't know if I can actually use the NPX skills tool to like store my own and like have them centrally so that I can access them. I guess I could probably do that. Do you have any hot tips for anyone? I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
I mean, what I do, obviously, I store each skill as this individual repo in GitHub. So it all goes out to GitHub. Okay. And then I version control it. And I say, anytime you touch that, you better sync it to GitHub. So then I always have like a backup copy. And then it's running tests on this and everything else. That's one unlock I did because obviously early on, my OpenClaw deleted itself and I lost everything. And so since then, I've been backing everything up to GitHub. So, but that's like kind of like a kind of a workaround to have skills ready. And then I'm also defining a skill per agent. So I have like a DevOps agent, and the DevOps agent's responsibility is just only DevOps, and it has only DevOps skills assigned to it. So then it has context for just these skills. It doesn't need context for every skill I have.
Yeah.
And I think since I changed it to specific skills per agent, it's gotten more clever on how to use the skills.
Now, when you create an agent in that sense, are you talking specifically of something like Claude Code, or like what you said you create a DevOps agent? Where are you creating that?
So, I mean, in the context of OpenClaw, or I would say OpenClaw Code as well, you can create basically folders, and each folder is its own project. And within the project, you can have skills and all these things within inside. And you define each folder as its own agent, like its own personality, what it's capable of, its own. Each folder gets its own Claude.md file, essentially,
Okay.
or agents.md file. And
Okay.
that's how you kind of version control it and have the separation. And then you can kick it off separately.
So we're going to jump into OpenClaw because there's all the insanity of what people are doing.
Absolutely.
But behind that, and I've never actually even installed it yet. It's been so busy, and it's not even that old. I feel like we've lived 10 years in the last 2 months. You're a person that operates in a high safety high secure environment. Obviously, you're not using this for work, I assume. But
no, strictly testing at the moment.
Right. But OpenClaw isn't necessarily. Can you talk to a little bit about OpenClaw? Isn't necessarily on day one, the minute you install it, some rogue crazy thing that's going to ruin your life.
No.
The things that we're hearing in the headlines are people deliberately doing things with it that they probably shouldn't have done, and that's not its modus operandi. That's not what it's trying to be necessarily. I always look at it as like an orchestrator of, if it's orchestrating, it comes in and it decides, you decide what you want it to orchestrate, you decide how much you want to give it of your life, you decide what things it has access to, and you put the guardrails in and all. Is that all true? I'm actually just assuming that's
I mean, you have to back up something, and this is where your DevOps specialty comes in, Brett, is like most people probably don't have the infrastructure knowledge on how to set up a server generally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're setting up their home PC or whatever server they want, and they're putting OpenClaw on it. And they have maybe not the comprehension of how to secure the server, regardless of OpenClaw. I'm just saying, hey, putting a server on the internet with a website maybe is not a good idea if you have everything open, right? And that's, I think, what really burned a lot of people with OpenClaw, because they're, putting it out there. They didn't lock it down. All the ports were open. And then the first few versions of OpenClaw, the API keys were all just plain text stored locally. It was like version 0.1. Yeah, I mean, it's still early days for this product. So, I mean, if you're putting your server out there, password 123, it's going to get hacked. Somebody's going to get in it. Somebody's going to take advantage of it. Yeah. But is the server going rogue by itself? No. I mean, unless you tell it to, it won't do that. And that's the thing. I mean, it's whatever you're telling it to do. And I've set up, I don't know, maybe 10 OpenClaws now. So I've set them up multiple times, trying to understand the process and like kind of really like the content. Oh, right. And no, it's really, you just have to have the basics down, locking down the server, installing OpenClaw, and figuring out like, hey, if I give OpenClaw an API key to Claude or OpenAI or whatever, look in the server to see where it's stored and just like figure out, is it secure? And then I realized quite quickly, I'm like, that's not secure. I'd rather store all my keys in 1Password and then have a connection from the OpenClaw to 1Password to grab the keys. And that's how I'm doing it like this. So it's a lot of security basics that are burning people. Now, it is possible that, you just update it incorrectly and you open more ports by accident. But you just have to constantly monitor this stuff. And I built like a security skill for OpenClaw. Obviously, it doesn't pass any of the tests. I built it just for myself, and I put it in the OpenClaw hub. And essentially, it just checks, do you have your firewall turned on? Do you have a VPN? Are all the ports, locked? It's basic IT stuff.
Okay.
And that's what's really hurting a lot of people, and they don't realize. And I just saw on Hacker News that somebody's charging $5,000 to install OpenClaw servers for people in San Francisco at the moment.
That's awesome. I mean, good for them. Good for them. That's awesome.
It's one curl command and you have it installed.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Right. But you need a VPC somewhere. You need, you need a droplet. I mean, I think when it sort of reached its first sort of peak not really peak hype, but like when it first got hyped up, it was the first time I'd ever seen an open source project where basically all the cloud providers within a week of each other all put out notifications saying, hey, we have a way for you to run this one app on our platform, like a one-click install for this thing. And I had never seen that. I'd never seen like major top tier cloud companies going, oh, suddenly we care so much about this brand new month-old piece of open source that we're going to make it a dedicated product for you to run on our platform. And that's just never really happened. I've never seen that. It's, normally it takes 5-10 years for a mature product to be something that, Google Cloud or Azure care about, right? Like they're not going to hype it up, but it's reached such hype cycle. And I think there's so many players now all competing for the agent, the place where you run your agents. We've got a ton of little startups that have been around for a couple of years, all trying to play in that space. Daytona, who's been on this show, has pivoted to be in that space as sort of the place you run your agents. And it's really just abstracting what you and I would do, which was create a dedicated server and lock it down, make sure that you got it on patch rotation, make sure that the port's on exposed, and that if you're going to put SSH out there, put it in a high random port, make sure it's
install Tailscale, these type of things.
Tailscale, doing all the things that we do. And OpenClaw out of the box should probably have like a built-in lockdown skill where it's just going to automatically do that as a part of its install to prepare for battle essentially on the internet.
That's a great point you brought up, Brett. I mean, the picture behind you, like everything's on fire. That's actually my OpenClaw server a couple times already. I mean, I set everything up, and when you set it up as root, that's obviously bad advice. You should never do that. So it's running as root, and I got really frustrated in Telegram, and I'm writing something, and I said, just delete it. Just delete, whatever it is. Well, OpenClaw took it literally and deleted the entire project and down to the root and just deleted a server. No longer responsive. I was like, wow, okay, that worked.
So it did an RM.
So lesson learned, don't run it as root.
Okay. Where do you see, like for you, what are some anecdotal, like things that you think are reasonably safe to try with it? If someone's new and they're a little concerned, because we had a great, not really a question. I don't understand the interest in OpenClaw as hallucinations are mathematically unsolvable and prompt injection attacks haven't been solved. It's just a gigantic attack surface. And while those are all technically true things, it's still just software, right? Like it's still something that's on my machine that I can lock down, that I can control. It's just software that's running in a loop, access to an LLM. So it's not...
Exactly.
These problems aren't unsolvable.
And you can lock down the prompts. For example, OpenClaw has their community in Discord, and actually OpenClaw is running in Discord. So you can actually, everyone's trying to prompt inject it the whole time. And, the founder, Peter, is trying to encourage people to prompt inject it and try to break it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
by the way,
in
that
the chat,
Discord server is insane. That Discord server
it's crazy, all this stuff going on.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's now the biggest Discord server on the planet. Like, it's insane.
But I mean, what you do is you lock down your prompt to just your device. So you can actually pair your prompt to your device. So you say, only my device, regardless what you get, is the only one you listen to, like actual commands. You can answer questions with everybody else, but you never process a command. So it's like only locked down to my device.
Yeah. And in response to the whole, as hallucinations are mathematically unsolvable, the way I'm looking at it now, especially that we have the newest models, Opus, I mentioned these earlier, Opus 4.6, Sonnet 4.6 is pretty good, and then GPT 5.4. For me, my perspective has changed because once the AI gets, like we're beyond 80% on like the Sweetbench boards and like a lot of these testing infrastructures, humans are not infallible. Like humans, before we had the AI doing the work, humans were making mistakes too. And we would recover
and still to this day,
it still makes mistakes. So I don't need the AI to. I've sort of changed my thought process around. I don't need the AI to be 100% accurate at everything I ask it to do, and I don't think it will ever be 100% accurate because I've started to look at it more as like a junior engineer, where if I hire someone and on day one I ask them to do a task, and the context that I'm giving them is a paragraph of information on their first day, they're more likely to make mistakes because they don't know the entire worldview of everything at the company. So they're going to make
Exactly.
decisions and assumptions that aren't correct. And I would call those errors, right? That would be a mistake by a human. AI is exhibiting the same behaviors to me now, like where it's not necessarily going to hallucinate on every request. In fact, I don't actually know the last time I would qualify that it technically hallucinated. I would say that it made mistakes or it made decisions that I don't agree with, but it's not like I don't remember the last time it incorrectly gave me HTML that wasn't actually a part of the spec. Like I don't remember the last time it did that. So that's
But you have human in the loop, right? Human in the loop is part of the solution. You have to check it. You have to verify things.
I would say that a year ago, I was worried about, and I was the guy shouting on the rooftop, hallucinations. Now, I don't remember the last time I cared because I have gone months with whenever it gives me something that I don't think was correct, I 99% of the time believe that it's because I didn't give it enough information and it made a false decision or it made an incorrect decision with lack of information. So I actually look at it as, I didn't realize it didn't know that.
Exactly.
And so I then correct it.
It comes back to you, right? Because you need to provide it more context.
So I guess my point here is that like with enough safety rails, with enough testing, and that's why I'm so focused on agentic DevOps in my courses and training and whatnot, because I feel like that's the next realm of us really ramping up our own understanding evaluations, understanding how do we test these things and how do we make sure that humans are in the loop? How do we, sure we can have an AI evaluate the PR of the first AI and a different AI evaluates the first one wrote it, a different one, but that AI is for the foreseeable future. I don't see the AI automatically approving the PR after it reviewed it. I still want to take a look. If the PR has got 1,000 lines of code that I have, or 5,000 lines of code, I'm probably going to ask it to simplify that PR and break it into different PRs. Like I'm going to reject that.
And does it align with my roadmap, right? Is that what I want in my product, right? That's also something you decide.
So so I'm not as confused or as scared around like how we're going to wrangle this thing anymore. I think we're all very aware that it can be wrong. And whether it's wrong because of a hallucination, because it literally made something up out of the blue, even though it was told to do something different, which again, I think that's increasingly rare. Or I just didn't give it enough context. I didn't give it the right docs so that it knew to make a better decision.
Yep.
I feel like that's going to be more of the problem going forward. Context, I keep saying that 2026 is a year of context. Like we're learning how to give it the right, that's what skills are really about is context. It's really helping us help it make the right decision. So I would push back a little bit on that.
I built a couple different skills. So I built one just for fun to see how it works with OpenClaw. And it was essentially connecting my Garmin watch and Strava and pulling all this data in. And it's my sleep patterns and all this health obsession sensor data. And essentially it pulled everything in and it tells you exactly, okay, now it's sunny outside. Now would be the perfect time to go for a jog or bike ride or something like this. So it's judging and it says, most likely you'll have your fastest run this week if you go now, right? Type of things. So,
awesome.
So it's pretty cool with what's possible there. And the other use case, I have a bunch of websites that I'm running and it's more like testing for our casino. So we have a bunch of stuff, big content sites we're always testing. And one of the sites was not passing Web Core Vitals. And if you don't know what that is like Google's measurement on speed and optimization and SEO and all these like things you have to pass.
Or accessibility.
Exactly. Accessibility. And it's like 4 key points. And my website wasn't passing. I was trying to mimic what we have in production. And essentially it was like the images were too big, too much JavaScript. It had a bunch of junk in there. And I said, okay, you have access to my Google Analytics. You have access to the Google Core Web Vitals. And you have access to the WordPress. We don't use WordPress at work, but don't worry. And basically it went out, it built itself a skill for WordPress. It built itself a skill to connect to all the different Google endpoints. And then it started testing. It started iterating and going, okay, now I fixed this. Now I can go start moving JavaScript and figure out if it breaks anything. And it kept really iterating all these things until it actually passed the Core Web Vitals. So it fixed it itself. It took like 40 minutes, I think, and a gazillion tokens, but it did successfully fix my website. So, it went out there, it did all these things. I was quite impressed.
So you're running OpenClaw on a cloud server, it sounds like. Not like you didn't
Yeah,
buy
I'm
the
running
Mac
in
Mini and put it in
DigitalOcean.
your closet.
Hey, I'm happy everybody's doing it because, as an Apple shareholder, that makes me happy. But I see no value in this at all. I mean, running in the cloud server, it costs what, $8 a month, whatever it is, to have a cloud server does the job.
Is it so? I guess for that price, it doesn't need a lot of resources. I mean, I was assuming it would need at least 4 CPUs and 16 gig of RAM, like that kind of thing.
I mean, you can run it on a Raspberry Pi. The thing is,
Okay.
it depends what you're doing. If you're just doing like a bunch of queries to the LLM, you don't need much power at all. Now, if you're like building something locally, obviously you need the power to run this application, whatever you're building locally. So that's where the power is required. Or if
Okay.
you're running a local LLM.
Right. I think that's a point too. Is like I wouldn't personally be interested in running. I think like the future might be it runs in the closet on a local LLM and then it's essentially free, right? That's the dream. That's living the dream right there. That's why
Yes.
I think people buy the Mac Minis. But I mean, I'm on an M4 and the models I want to run still can't fit on my 48 gig memory.
No.
Like I basically need a half a terabyte of memory to really run anything of.
If you're really going to
any-
run a proper
Yeah.
model locally, you need a Ferrari server sitting underneath your desk, right? I mean, that thing is going to be a beefy NVIDIA something or other. But does it help me to pull Garmin data to have this massive model sitting underneath my desk? Probably not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So your choices are really like use a cloud model and potentially OpenClaw uses up a bunch of tokens and burns through your credit card or whatever unless you set limits and then if you set limits then it can only work so much and then it stops. Like have you run into that where like you set limits and it hits a limit like or do you just let it YOLO through your
It YOLO'd very quickly through my limits. And I had like the autofill enabled as well. And all of a sudden I got like 2 emails after another, like $100 from Anthropic, $100. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, maybe it's just like an error in the Anthropic or something. And I realized it's like, it's going in the background. Just
it's not the
I had
same
this,
emails. Yeah,
no,
it's not. Yeah.
I had this like refill the API going in the background. That was brutal, but I figured that out. And essentially what I have now is I built my server. So it starts at a very low model. So for example, it uses Sonnet or Haiku on Claude for the basic tasks. Hey, kicking off a cron, kicking off these things. And then if it can't figure it out, it escalates to Sonnet. And if not, it goes up to Opus.
Oh, wow. Is that a built-in
so if it's like
feature or did you?
It's built in by, you could do that either on Claude or on OpenClaw. Basically, you can say, hey, start at this model. But if I say these specific commands, then automatically use Opus.
Okay. So it sort of triggers that. So if you said like, develop me a back-end, Golang, that might trigger the
Exactly
or something. Yeah. We've got a bunch of links to share, but what is your general advice that you would like if you're in the elevator and you've got just if you got 60 seconds with someone and they're like, I really want to get into OpenClaw, what are some like not to do's and what to do's for someone right like today? Because obviously, like there's been lots of iteration in the last couple of months. It sounds like it's a little more mature, still very early days, but a little more mature than the Wild Wild West O.1.
I mean, I would recommend everyone to install it just to figure out how it works. I would maybe not use it for production or anything like this, but just understand how all the memory files work and how it's all built. Because this configuration is now being adopted by Claude and OpenAI. They're all kind of using the same type of structure. And I believe it's going to be the standard across all the models quite soon.
So I'm going to put your links in here. You've got a security checklist you created.
And this is a skill as well. So, I mean, like I said, it's a skill that goes out, makes sure you have fail to ban enabled, your firewall enabled, all these different things. And I encourage everyone to build their own skill. I mean, you don't have to use mine. You can use it as a reference and say, hey, use this as reference, build my own skill.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm encouraging everybody. Build your own skills because it matches your use case better anyway.
So one of the things that I don't actually know this for a fact, but one of the things I'm assuming that people are doing is there's a hallucination factor with certain models. So if someone's trying to do this on the cheap and they're trying to use a local model or they're using Raspberry Pi with a local model, anything other than a $10,000 rig is going to have
exactly
to run your own local model. And those local models will hallucinate more. Like generally they are not like the state of the art open source models that everyone talks about. Oh, the latest Quinn is so great. like what they're talking about are the models that take 400 gig of RAM. So unless you've got that, you're going to be using a scaled down model essentially that can fit on your GPU, and those will hallucinate more. So I'm not even an OpenClaw user yet, but I can anticipate that when I use it, I'm going to want it using Claude models probably, and I'm going to have to set limits like you did, because if I'm going to make anything of value with it, because James is like, don't hook it up to anything valuable at all. And sure, that can be your approach, because you can do things with it without ever giving it keys to your email or anything else, right? Like
you don't need to give it keys.
You don't have to give it access to all of your stuff. It can be just like Claude Code, which has access to local tooling and can do, stuff like that, and just access things in the open, that things that are public. But I personally,
regarding the security, real quick,
quick,
Bret, is the least permission model, right? The least privilege model. So even for OpenClaw or whatever API tool you're using, set up API keys specific for the agent, right? So lock it down so it only has read permission and these type of things. Don't give it access to your email. Set up its own email box, for example. Do these type of things. So then you're really certain that the blast radius is a bit smaller.
Yeah. It actually speaks a little bit to, I've been thinking more about came about with the MCP as well, how much our API permission models are based on humans and not bots. Because, for example, if I was going to tiptoe into giving it access to my email, I would want to set up rules that basically is like, you get read only, and you only get my inbox, and you only get this one folder, and you can't do anything. Or you can only write drafts, but you don't have the permissions to send. You can write the draft and I have to review it. But I don't believe we have all those layers of API model permission, like API permissions, because we've never really needed that level of granularity. Like it's either like you get access to my email inbox and everything,
or not.
You get got access or no access, and maybe I'm outdated. Maybe the new Google tool actually provides some sort of permissions level that I'm not aware of. But I suspected for a while that we're going to need to come up with all new levels of permissions to really limit this. At least I hope we do. Gosh, as an industry, I hope we do, because we're going to want to tiptoe with these things. And I've been trying to think about how we can go around the approach of dynamically changing permissions on the fly. So, for example, I give it the read permissions, and it only gets the write key, the WR, like the key to write to things or do the updates and deletions once I've approved it. And it can't even accidentally hallucinate and do it because it doesn't have the key. So like somehow we're going to need to come up with these new permission mechanisms. And like, we might even have to modify one password to dynamically switch things out in environment variables, which historically environment variables that change, you have to restart the program. Like there's all these things at the system level that I'm thinking about is like, we're going to have to probably adapt a lot of the infrastructure of the internet to truly do all this
to support this
scale.
Right? Yeah. To support this. It's a solved problem already like by infrastructure, but now we need to adapt it to AI, which is not prepared for this. The granularity of permissions and things like this. I just see, I've been around quite a few people, looked at their servers and whatnot, and they just YOLO'd all the permissions. I'm like, wow, you live dangerously, huh? Yeah. And it just takes one wrong command and
Yeah, the last thing I want to ask you about real quick is NanoClaw, because this is like hot off the press kind of stuff that even newer than OpenClaw. And I only saw the headlines. I didn't know what it was about. It sounds like you know a little bit more than I do. Give us like the elevator pitch of NanoClaw.
Sure. So NanoClaw is essentially just a real bare bones version of OpenClaw. And actually on the website, they actually mentioned that OpenClaw is like 50,000 lines of code and 7,000 integrations, and then just thousands and thousands of everything, right? And I believe NanoClaw is like 5,000 lines of code. All the agents are spun up inside Docker containers. So it really isolates the agents compared to the operating system. And it's really built like security first, which is quite interesting. And since I'm a huge Docker fan myself, I think it's quite a nice setup. And I think it's one of the only claws out there that supports like swarms of agents. So you have Docker Swarm and you have the agents. You can kind of swarm up your agents, which is quite a cool concept if you think about it.
Yeah. Is NanoClaw at the point where like someone would skip OpenClaw and use NanoClaw instead? Is it a replacement
it's definitely
for OpenClaw?
Prepared for that. Yeah, I think it's definitely ready for that. Now it's limited as far as features because they want to keep it lean. So it's only like Telegram and WhatsApp you can use. You can't use Discord and all these things. So they really limited the plugins and everything else to really focus on security. And then you can always build on top of it, but they want to make it secure first.
So this is not just a wrapper around OpenClaw. This is like something.
This is a separate project altogether. Yep.
Okay. Well, I certainly like the container aspect. I've been really surprised how little we've been isolating with containers so far, like between the harnesses. Like, I mean, one of the biggest concerns a year ago when Claude Code came out was the fact that it sort of had roughshod over your system, still does.
Yep.
Co-work, I've been playing around with co-work lately because I'm trying to get my wife into it, not a developer, and giving her Claude Desktop. And now that's got co-work, Claude Chat, Claude Co-work, and Claude Code all in one tool. The Claude Code GUI is kind of garbage. I wouldn't recommend anybody use that yet, but it's like the worst of the GUIs for coding harnesses. But the co-working is really interesting because it's simply, to me, it's like it's actually running in a VM on your machine. I think I saw someone on the internet saying it just downloaded a 40 gig VM. And I'm like, yep, we're back to the VM. We're back to VM.
Exactly.
And it does it very transparently, and it only mounts in the directories that you give it when you set it. When you start it, you actually tell it which directory to start in, and that it only has permissions to that directory. It kind of bind mounts it in, I guess, to the VM. So I'm excited to hear about NanoClaw because I feel like, okay, we've settled down on the hype, like a little bit, like we're starting to see signs of the first iterations of maturity, which means that people are finally going to bring in security conversations. Which to me means, okay, now we're doing VMs locally that are transparent in the background. Now we're going to be doing containers locally. And I've actually been surprised at Docker Desktop not being the leaders in this. I've actually been a little concerned that Claude Code is just going to basically run right past Docker Desktop. And that would, like, someone told me that in the near future, Claude Desktop or whatever the iterations are going to be, like, that will be the way we all run containers because we're going to be running it with AI. And it's actually going to, anyway. Yeah. It's like a conspiracy theory or maybe a little bit, but it's been interesting to see how finally we're getting back into VMs and containers with these toolings, and that they're not native inside of Docker Desktop yet. I mean, you have MCP, you have Gordon and all these other things inside of Docker Desktop. There's been there's sandboxing and all these things, these new lab things they're doing. Like they've got so much stuff they're releasing over the last 6 months, and I haven't been able to keep up because that's pretty much obviously what Docker's also focused on right now is continuing to iterate on their tooling around C agent and there's stuff for running AI safely inside of Docker containers, which I'm looking forward to the day where none of this stuff is installing tools on my system anymore. It's all doing
exactly.
So, well, this has been awesome, dude. I wish we could go for 3 more hours, but
we have to do it again. Before we go, I encourage everyone, regardless if you're a developer or a high-level AI user, I found this project. And it's Claude Code PM course for product managers. And I know it sounds for product managers, but actually it's using Claude Code in the terminal and you're actually walking through setting it all up and everything. And what I find really great about this, it explains the structure and how Claude works with all the files and how you can actually spin up multiple agents and personalize all the agents. And I think this is just a brilliant resource for people to really understand how the different AIs work, because I believe the structure will work with any LM or any model out there. So if you understand how it works, then you can kind of recreate it for your business or whatever, because my objective is then create this structure for my whole team. So everyone uses the same structure and spins off Claude's off the structure. So everyone's using the same context.
That's pretty cool. I'm going to check that one out. Some of my favorite skills lately are things like marketing skills, and I have a front-end designer skill. I think it's actually part of the Claude Code skills list. But yeah, like the things that I'm definitely interested in skills around things that I am not good at, because that's usually where I will give bad prompting. The AI will more likely go off the rails. So yeah, I'm supplementing I don't have the lawyer ones yet, but it's actually pretty good at contract review out of the box without any skills. But I feel like I probably need that in my little consulting business. So this has been fun. Do you think that I could just skip OpenClaw for now and just, if I've only got a few hours a week to tinker around, would NanoClaw be the thing I should point to first? Or do you think I need to start?
Actually, I'd point to this course right here, this Claude Code PM course.
Yeah.
Because then it kind of gives you the baseline on how you should be using your AI and how you should be creating sub-agents and swarms of agents. And like I said, it's built for Claude, but I really believe you can use this with OpenAI, Gemini, etc.
The same rules apply. Okay. Real quick, last question. On your skills, do you you talked about you put them in their own separate repos. Does that mean you're doing like Git submodules, or like are you checking out repos inside of repos? How are you doing that?
It is submodules. I have to actually look through it again because it's all being done by Claude.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I don't do any code commits or anything.
Yeah. So you're asking it, you're saying like, go get this skill from this repo. Is that
yes?
like,
yep.
Okay. So, and it figures
but it's still installed locally, but all code changes are then committed to this repo. And yeah, essentially what I said is like, okay, you can write code to the skill, you could do all these things, but you're not allowed to commit directly. So I made it very specific. You can't commit directly. You have to create a pull request. And I'm the only one that can merge the pull request. So because I learned over time that I was just writing directly the whole time. And I said, okay, now I have to figure out the proper workflow so I understand what the heck it's trying to write.
Yeah. And I can see like, I'm going to be treating this thing, especially as I would sort of ramp up my automation with it on GitHub. I'm going to do all the normal GitHub things that I would do for the first day employee.
Exactly.
Like I'm going to make sure branch protection's on so that they can't write to the release branch or the default branch. I'm going to make sure that, PR reviews are mandatory and requires approval and checks have to be run. And like all of the rigor of normal business level GitHub stuff is all going to be there. And when I give it a pat, if that's, I'm assuming what it needs, I don't know if it's no auth.
It is.
Flow.
Yep.
Okay. If I'm going to give it pat or whatever, I'm going to give it the minimum permissions so that it can't just be admin in my repo and delete it
But be very careful because these are really clever models. I've had mine prompt me before as like, if you only give me this extra permission, I can probably do this as well. It's like really being clever, trying to get more permissions out of me. I'm like, no, try again tomorrow.
It's funny. It's funny you say that because I had that happen last week and I had a weird moment of like, do I need to get a defensive mode right now? Like, do I need to like shields up myself? Because I think it was asking me, I don't know if it was a GitHub key, it was something else, but I was just in a normal Claude Code session and I was iterating on a project and it kept saying, well, if you give me, I think it was something to do with DigitalOcean. It was like, if you give me your DigitalOcean token, then I can go and check all that for you. And I was like, yeah, no, I'd rather just check it on the web interface myself. And
same thing with Cloudflare. It was like, it kept on reminding me like all the time, like, oh, you need to flush the cache again. It would be so much easier if you just gave me the key. And every time it remind me of this, I don't want to give you access to Cloudflare.
Yeah, this is the kind of conversation I would have with a junior employee. That's like,
right.
If you just gave me access to that, I could do it for you. And I'm like, well, let's let the senior engineers do that for now. So cool. This has been a lot of fun. Are you making any videos? Or are you just doing blog posts and newsletters?
It's just brianchristner.io. I'm writing like a weekly roundup of what's going on in the world of AI at the moment and just quick and dirty, And I'm starting again to just do my Byte podcast. You remember a long time ago, I was doing like just 2 to 5 minute videos. What is OpenClaw? What is that? And just kind of highlighting some of the stuff we discussed today, but in a shortened version.
Yeah, I do read you're one of the few emails that I read consistently because it's short and sweet and covers all the big hits. So if I was too busy this week to like pay attention to Hacker News or register headlines or whatever, like your email's a good summary. And yeah, and it costs nothing. So thank you.
It costs nothing. I'm not charging.
All right. Thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Thanks, Brett.
As always, we run long and we waited too long to have this. We got to have you back soon. And I'm excited to hear what you're doing with agents here in the near future.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for having me, Brett.
Hey, thanks for joining. We'll see you in the next episode.